This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Wednesday, July 26, 2017. I have an awesome guest again this week, and that's David Ruddock. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, Miriam. I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast because you and I are both very opinionated people who don't pull any punches, and we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. Did you go to New York yesterday for the Moto Z2 Force launch?
I did. I just got back at about 2:00 last night.
Oh my!
So yes, quite a long day for me.
It's funny because, they invited me, obviously. I couldn't justify going to New York City for just this thing, unless somebody was going to pay for it, and that wasn't going to happen. Obviously, Elena was there, I think, from Chip Chick, so that aspect was covered. So, I've been a big fan of the Z2 Play, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about the Z2 Force. And now I've only played with it for a few hours. I think you've got a little bit more seat time because you played with it at the airport.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts off the top of your head? Like, what are the things that stick out for you?
I mean, immediately, most of the things that I think really stuck out to people about this phone were the things that were leaked before it was even launched, were, the reduced battery capacity, the lack of a headphone jack, and then the fact that apparently there is not a regular Z2 this year. It's just the Force, which is a very interesting decision on Moto's part. I think the other thing is the high price point immediately is very much in play. I think that's mitigated to an extent by the fact that it's available on all four carriers, and so you can pay for it month to month. And then I just think overall, it feels like, well, what did we expect from Motorola when they committed themselves to this design to continue having compatibility for the mods over time? And I think we got pretty much exactly what would be predicted. Although the smaller battery is kind of a slap in the face, I think, that really wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, the mixed feelings are, I liked the Z and the Z Force last year a lot. The things I liked about them was how thin the Z was, even though it's too thin in a way. But I mean, you got to admire a phone that's 5mm thin, right? Thick, I should say, because something is not thin, it's thick, no matter how thin it is.
Yes.
Right? Thank you for agreeing with that. It's just like this weird colloquialism we've developed as tech reporters. I kind of hate it, right? Anyway, so 5mm thick is really interesting from a technical point of view. The other thing I liked was mods. Honestly, I think the mod platform is very cool. I still think to this day, I'm enough of a nerd that to me it strikes an interesting chord somewhere in my deep nerdiness. But what I liked about it was that it had, it kind of checked all the boxes at the time. Snapdragon 820 at the time was good. The cameras, both of them had OIS. The Force one was slightly higher resolution, which does, as you know, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing because you get smaller pixels. But whatever, they did okay in imaging. Audio was disappointing a bit because of lack of headphone jack, but at least they went with the analog USB-C interface, which means there's no active electronics in the dongle, and et cetera, et cetera. So overall, I was like, okay, good first try. And then the thing that really made it killer for me was the Z Force's battery. Because get this, David, I went to Burning Man, as I do every year for my I'm staff there and I work there. And I thought, what phone would I take that I don't have to charge the whole week I'm there and just use casually, like for checking emails and maybe the occasional photo? Because I take multiple phones, of course. We both travel with multiple phones all the time, right?
Of course.
So I took the Z Force and the Kate Spade battery pack. That's the one they sent me. And we're talking about 3,500 milliamp hour in the phone and a 3,000 or 2,500 in the pack. So I had 5,000 or 6,000 milliamps with me, and I did not charge it for the whole week I was up there. And
that's impressive.
That's amazing, right? I mean, it wasn't on all day, right? It was not always connected to a network either, so it wasn't idling a lot. But it's kind of amazing. And so now you can't do that with this smaller battery in this phone. And they did the same thing with the Z Play to the Z2 Play, where they reduced the size of the battery. And then, of course, they dropped the Z completely. What we expected to be a Z2 non-Force this year. Let's talk about what we both think is going on here. Like, I'm concerned they're just trying to make money with the mods, the battery mods. Do you feel the same?
Oh, that's absolutely my instinct here. I feel like the Z2 Force is specifically designed to appeal to carriers and retailers, not to customers specifically. I mean, well, to customers who buy Motorola's phones, them being the wireless operators here in America. And the pitch is, hey, we're going to sell you this phone with a battery that's probably not going to last most people a full day. And by the way, you can pitch these expensive accessories to greatly increase your effective profit margin on handset sales to consumers now. And hey, we can remove the headphone jack too, because we know you got Bluetooth earbuds to sell.
And do you think that was also because I had this feeling that with Samsung and others, not like major players like Samsung and others in Android land, not removing the headphone jack this year, we kind of had a minor victory with the headphone jack surviving a few more years. I still feel. And I was thinking that Moto might be smart enough to keep the headphone jack, or rather to put it back on the Z Force and the Z2 Force and Z2, if there was a Z2, which clearly there will never be one. And I was wrong, and I should have known better, because the cynic in me says exactly what you're saying. Hey, we have an adapter in the box. They're going to lose it. They're going to have to buy another adapter. They don't know they can get a $3 one on Amazon. And more importantly, as you said, Bluetooth earbuds are a pretty big profit maker for the carriers.
Yeah,
so,
I think it really does come down to money in a big way with this phone. And I think that's kind of the hard thing to shake, especially when you just look at the decision to shrink the battery. It's so hard to get around that.
And then what do you think about the other big issue to me on this one, related to this profit making? It's interesting that it's available on all 4 carriers this year.
I think Motorola probably made a pretty compelling business case for this phone. And I think that comes down to the upside, potential upside in terms of, selling customers on these expensive accessories. I think that really is what it's about. And I think that's probably also why they may be stuck with one model. If Motorola realized they could push basically one hardware SKU, they could probably cut down on their costs a little bit. And, carriers can position this phone uniquely as being their ultra rugged premium device, I think. So it stands apart in the portfolio.
And the modularity, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Which means you need to buy a battery, and now they made sure you would. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's a very good point you're making. And I think that I'm just surprised about the carriers, because I really thought that Verizon had such a stronghold on Moto. You know what I'm saying? That Verizon traditionally does not let Moto or other carriers do what they want with their phones, or at least has resisted as long as possible. Remember that as recently as the LG G2, we had a custom version for Verizon, right?
Yeah,
and that was LG. So I'm surprised. That's why I'm surprised it's on 4 carriers at launch. I would have expected this to be a Verizon exclusive for the first month, and then on all carriers after that, or something like that. So it's interesting.
I was a bit surprised by that too. I think maybe Verizon, isn't giving Motorola quite the sweetheart deal it probably has over the years anymore. Maybe the sales.
I think that's a good thing
there
for us. I think maybe because people should have the choice to buy that phone on any carrier if they want that phone. So that's that's always been a bit of a bone of contention for me, that Moto only had so many of their phones only on Verizon.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of an annoyance over the years, for sure. A lot of people missed out on some pretty decent Motorola handsets in the US because of that.
So I don't want to sound negative, because I think there are some positives about this phone, but at the same time, I want to talk about another thing that bugs me about it, which is the camera subsystem. I was excited to see when the leak showed dual camera, because I like dual camera systems. I think they bring something to the table that's important. And now we have a dual camera system that's interesting. It's very similar to what we had on the P9 last year,
right?
Because it's identical size sensor, one monochrome, one color, whereas the current Mate 9, P10, P10 Plus have a higher resolution sensor for monochrome. And more importantly, the P10 and the P10 Plus have OIS. And the lack of OIS wouldn't be a big deal to me if this phone was $600. This phone is more like around $800 or $7-something hundred. And I just can't fathom how they've gone from a single lens that was f over 1.8, that was either 13 or 21 megapixels with OIS last year, to dual lenses that are only f over 2.0 and that are non-OIS. So that unless they do some kind of software trickery using both sensors, which I don't know if they have the expertise to do that. Unless they do that, it's gonna be suffering in low light. And so far, my testing in low light has been kind of mixed. I'm not like wowed by this camera right now.
Yeah, I did some shooting yesterday in New York with it. I will say that I think it's a definite improvement over the Z and Z Force last year.
Okay.
I think especially in terms of the dynamic range performance, the Z and Z Force were pretty often very mixed results in those kinds of situations. I think that the phone this year produces photos that have better balance overall. Colors look a little more realistic. I think so far I've had very few shots that are dramatically over or underexposed, which was something that I did have a problem with the Z and Z Force last year.
Okay.
I think that you still see some of the typical Motorola camera problems. I'm still seeing, whites that are a little too blue, especially when light is challenging. Comparing to the Pixel, I was shooting with both the Pixel XL and the Z2 Force yesterday. And in challenging or strange lighting situations, the Z2 Force definitely aired cooler, whereas the Pixel was able to pick up areas that were naturally warm and be able to separate out the cooler tones more effectively. And also, the Z2 Force definitely processes more aggressively on fine details, especially if the light is more challenging than the Pixel does. So you can lose out on detail despite the sensor being a little bit higher resolution. So I would say it's a good camera in terms of stills.
But I agree. Like, I don't think it's a bad camera from my quick testing so far. And again, I want guys to know these are really first impression. I've spent maybe an hour with the phone walking around the neighborhood at sunset, so it's not like really a very good gauge. But I want to say that I think good cameras are the norm now. Like, you know what I'm saying, David? Like, at $800, I expect more than good.
That's true. And I mean, if you're asking me to pick between a Galaxy S8, a Pixel, and a Z2 Force, there's no way the Z2 Force is probably going to come up in the conversation.
That's my point. It should at least come in the conversation. It should have lead to a broad, like the U11 brings something to the table in terms of imaging. It's kind of a low light champ. And the Galaxy S8 is a super fast, well-rounded camera. And then the Pixel is arguably in some ways better, in some ways worse. Lack of OIS can be an issue. I've actually can prove that to people. I've now got a use case I can show to people that shows one of the only probably weakness of the XL and the Pixel. But it's like, I think I want it to be at least, in the ballpark when I feel like they just got to the fence of the ballpark.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say last year they were still yet, further behind everybody else in the camera department. So this is a welcome improvement, I think. But yeah, it doesn't quite get to that level. And I think it's kind of the same kind of story we saw with OnePlus and the OnePlus 5, where, well, I think that there, to an extent, there's some real know-how that has to go into image processing performance. And Motorola doesn't quite seem to have it. And OnePlus definitely didn't have it. So,
but it's interesting to me because Qualcomm sells this as a service, basically. You can pay them and they will tell you how to leverage their super awesome ISP algorithms. And so how can they miss that boat? Like, it seems to me they didn't want to spend the money again.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure how much of, necessarily how Qualcomm's benchmarks against, say, what Google does or what Samsung does on their own, or how much Samsung and Google are doing. Yeah, exactly. It's such a black box. We can't really look into it too deeply. I wouldn't be surprised if Motorola does avail themselves of some of those services.
I would like to think they do. But I think the key takeaway, and it's funny that you brought up the OnePlus 5 just as I was thinking of my next question to you, which was, now that we've seen these two phones, now you're going to say we should probably use them both a little bit longer, and I agree with you. We'll review them, right? You'll be reviewing it, I presume. Why would you buy this over OnePlus 5?
Oh, I honestly can't think of a reason aside from CDMA carrier compatibility. That's pretty
and
much
aside
it.
From the rugged screen and the mods.
I guess the mods have never been a selling point for me, and the rugged screen is. I'm very much of the opinion that the drawbacks are just too much to bear. Especially now that this year I'm hearing that you cannot replace the plastic lens on.
Yeah, because it's fused. Because they wanted to make it thinner, and also there used to be a gap. So here's my take on this. We kind of agree. I don't want to knock this phone because I've been such a fan of the Z2 Play. Really, I still think the Z2 Play is one of my favorite mid-rangers this year. I have an issue with the Force based on last year's experience where I took it to Burning Man and there's a lot of fine dust there and it's slightly abrasive. And that screen is not visibly scratched if you just look at it. But if you look at it in the light at the right angle, holy crap, that screen is scratched up. And I didn't drop it. It's just fine micro scratches because it's plastic, right? It's not glass. Is that the thing?
I think so. I mean, mine is already, I posted a picture on Twitter this morning. It's bad. I've got some pretty deep, long gouges in the screen right now. And that's just from having it in my pocket. And, when I pull it out, it like hits the rivets on my jeans sometimes. And so it's just like, and that will even scratch a glass phone if you work at it.
I just went to your Twitter. Oh my God, that's worse than me.
Yeah, it's brutal. Andrew Martinique posted some too. I think we're going to be seeing lots of photos of scratched up Z2 Forces in the next.
This seems worse than last year, to be honest with you, because mine have fine micro scratches, nothing else.
Yeah, I have little dimples and pock marks on my Force from last year, not big long gouges. And the other thing I noticed about the gouges is they very much seem to distort the shape of the plastic cover on the screen, so you get little warping.
I already have warping like right out of the box. If I look at that glass or whatever, that surface, it is not flat.
Yeah, and I think that's plastic. The other thing we've noticed, and Ryan and I, who both have the phone, have noticed is that if you press down, especially near the bottom of the display, and with a little bit of force, you can hear what sounds like the adhesive sticking, the adhesive, coming loose and tightening again.
Oh no, I have to try that.
And so I can hear it most on the fingerprint scanner. I can hear clicking for sure where something is not quite fully attached. Now, this phone doesn't come out till August 10th, so maybe there's some refinements.
Maybe they're pre-production. I don't know. I mean, I noticed the only other phone I ever noticed these kind of weird wavy imperfections on the display was the LG G5 last year that had that kind of like weird rounded off top.
Yeah.
And that was never perfect around the earpiece.
Yeah. I do remember that.
But that wasn't plastic. Strange. That was actually glass. It was just malformed glass, I guess.
Yeah, I think that was just some kind of strange side effect of the manufacturing process.
But look, the fact that the display is shatterproof, I think for some people is going to be a major bonus. I don't read out my phones that often. I don't think I need that. I could have done without and have like 1 millimeter thicker battery in there because of it. That would have been my compromise, but hey, I guess we don't call the shots in the marketing department over there, right?
Definitely not. I mean, at the same time, I'm also just like, if the screen's shattering is such a concern to you, I mean, there are only, a million case options out there that can protect you pretty well. I know not everybody wants to use a case, but if that's something that's, very important to you, it's something that can be reasonably guarded against. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a market for a shatterproof phone, but I think you give up a lot in terms of other durability to get that.
Yeah, I think you're making a good point. I think that it's to me it's a gimmick in a way. It's like a gimmick that unfortunately takes away from one of the most significant part of what this phone is about, or should be about as a flagship, as the sole and lone flagship for Motos this year, which is battery life and perfection in terms of fit and finish and build quality, which I think we're missing out on because of this choice of a multi-layer plastic shock-proof whatever crack-proof display.
Yeah, it's definitely a compromised decision, and I think it's one that's I just don't see it resonating with regular consumers as much. I mean, if I was to walk into a carrier store, sight unseen, and somebody showed me this phone and said, well, this is the newest high-end phone from Motorola. They show you the mods. And I would guess that the chance that the rep ever mentions that the display is plastic is zero, if they even know that. They will mention, obviously, the screen can't break, but it would not take you long at all to understand why it can't break. I think the average person would very quickly notice the scratches building up and probably be pretty unhappy with that too.
Right. So let's talk about the good things, though. It is thinner, which I personally like. I felt that the Force was a bit bulky last year. Now, of course, it comes at the cost of battery life and all the things we discussed. I mean, 2730 milliamp hour. That sounds like a flagship from 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's not enough. I mean, they make arguments about why making it thinner is better. I don't believe the arguments at all.
I mean, it is a Snapdragon 835, so it is a very power efficient chip. So there's a potential that I actually think it's going to be an all-day phone for most people, but I'm just bummed that Moto has this, tradition of making these super long-lasting, thicker phones, and they kind of dropped this year completely. And I think you're right. A lot of it is about, boosting the mod ecosystem and boosting the carrier's pockets at the same time, right? So, but Snapdragon 835 means we're going to get a speedy phone. What's been your experience with the phone so far in terms of like usability, experience, software, all that stuff?
Performance seems very good. I mean, and we came to expect that, I think, with the Z last year with Moto. They did such a good job optimizing for the Snapdragon 820 and the Z and Z Force. Those phones were very, very fast. The Z2 Force feels very, very fast. I'm sure that the battery life for a phone with this battery capacity will probably be decent. I love the AMOLED display. I like that Motorola sticks with those, in spite of
they're beautiful.
In spite of the alleged supply issues. And yeah, the performance overall seems very good. The fingerprint scanner reads pretty snappily. The Moto Active display, waving your hand over the screen to check notifications, still love that. You get the dual flash for the front-facing camera, which I think a lot of people probably appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's a cool little feature, and Moto's been doing it for a while now. But this time it's a dual, like the Z2 Play. Personally, I have no need for it, but I do appreciate it. I'm a little bummed out that the camera is only 5 megapixel in the front, though. For a flagship today, that seems a little.
Yeah, that's definitely on the low side, and I'm curious why they made that decision. I guess they figure with the flash, you're probably not going to have to deal with noise as much if you're able to use that. But yeah, that's a bit questionable.
I mean, 8 is kind of the norm, some do more and better, and it's selfie cam, I'm not too worried about it, but still, yeah.
Yeah, and overall, the software experience is still what we've come to expect from Motorola, aside from the bloatware on the carrier versions, most of which can be disabled. I've already gone through this AT&T one, and the only thing...
So you have an AT&T one. I have a T-Mobile one. I have a gray one, I think, actually.
Yeah, they seem to have spent out quite a spread. I don't know. Mine is black.
They have a custom gray color for T-Mobile. I read that somewhere. It just looks like the gray from the Z last year, but it's definitely not as dark black as the photos I've seen some of you guys take, and definitely not that beautiful white and gold, which I have on my last year's Z Play, which I really love that color combo.
Yeah, I like that the color on the but I got a black one. So I think the black looks okay. I think that design-wise the camera module is such an eyesore, but that's because of mods, so it's hard to pick too much of a bone with that.
I kind of like that. I always use the little wooden what's it called?
Style
cover on my Zs. There was this. I have this prototype style cover that never came out. That's a light, like a light wood, like a bamboo maybe, or something that looks like it could be bamboo. And I've used that on all the Zs I've played with, and it's on the Z2 Force now. But I cannot conceive of using as Moto Z without covering those contacts in the back. Also, it's too sharp, like it feels wrong in hand. So I use the style cover no matter what. So I always add a bit of thickness to the phone anyway, which is kind of why I think the Z Force last year felt really bulky to me, because once you add the style cover on it, it does become thick. Whereas this feels good in hand. The build quality is superb, though. I have to say, I'm really impressed with the build quality.
It does seem pretty nice, definitely. I would say it definitely seems better in the Play.
The display's adhesive thing you mentioned, I haven't experienced that, but could just be because it's maybe pre-production or it's still drying. That's the problem with these adhesives, right?
Yeah.
We get these phones, they were probably made 3 days ago, like over the weekend in some China factory.
Oh yeah, they were bringing in the FedEx boxes to the event as we were getting ready to go in. So these are hot off the line, I'm sure.
So that's why maybe we're feeling that. But back to the display briefly, I think the thing I noticed that compared to last year's Z4. So last year, if you compared the Z and the Z Force side by side, the Z looked so much better, the display, because you didn't have all this layer of plastic and glass for the protection, for the shockproofing. And the contrast was better, the colors were brighter. But I feel that this year's Z Force, Z2 Force, they mitigated some of these issues because it's not as good as the Z, but better than last year's Z Force. So to me anyway, I don't know if you noticed any difference there.
I agree. It does look more vivid. Maybe that sounds some tuning and maybe down to like we were talking about the fused plastic now.
The fuse, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's helping.
But of course, it's Daydream compatible, except for all the scratches that are going to really be noticeable with a VR headset. Oh.
Yeah, that's, I don't know how many people care about Daydream anyway, so it's
Nobody
okay.
Does.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, look, we have to be the ones to call out these things, right? That's our job. So, but the things I like are the design. I still like the design, especially when you put a style cover. They feel nice in hand. I like the materials and build quality, other than the plastic front. If it's actually plastic, I don't know. Feels like plastic. I like the chamfered edge around it. The Z2 Play has that as well. I think it's gives it a bit of a unique vibe that feels a little more refined. Maybe it's just, I'm biased here because traditionally phones with chamfered edges that are polished look a little classier. I don't know. But it's something unique for sure. And then performance, I agree, is pretty top notch. But anything with a Snapdragon 835 these days is pretty baller experience wise, right? So,
Yeah, I think that, like I said, if you are interested in this phone, I think the things that are going to sell you are probably the clean software experience. If you're into the mods, then obviously that's the big selling point, the shatterproof display. And now that this is Moto's first 4-carrier phone in a long time. So that's obviously another thing.
That's going to be a big deal, yeah.
You can buy this phone anywhere, including US Cellular, in addition to the regular big 4. So it's not nothing. And, I'm sure Motorola is very proud of that accomplishment in terms of retail availability. And I guess we'll see how regular people respond to this phone versus critical response, which so far has been, as far as I can tell, overwhelmingly negative.
Really? I've just been more cautious, and I would say it's been mixed. But you're right. As you enumerate all the things that we just discussed, it seems more on the negative side than the positive side. I'm trying really hard to think of positives. If this thing had OIS and a headphone jack, honestly, I'd look past the display, scratchability. I'd look past the battery almost.
Oh, I can't look past the battery. That's just too much.
But simply because there's mods, right? Like, if there wasn't mods, it'd be a tougher pill to swallow because, you'd have to cord dangling with some USB-based charger, right? That would be ugly and annoying. But at least, you're, as much as I'm cynical like you about the fact that the carriers are making money selling battery packs, there is the option of making a phone slightly thicker and still feel nice in hand and have more battery life that's fully integrated. Right? That's, I think, one of the things about the mods that is cool, right? I mean,
yeah, I agree. I mean, the other thing too that I kind of brought up in something I wrote today was the other thing about these battery mods is the way Motorola's done it. In an ideal universe, they would be able to do some kind of full power pass through where the phone is actually powered by the mod. That's obviously complicated, but it's not how it works. The mod just charges the internal battery, which is inherently very inefficient. I mean, you're talking probably 60, 70% efficiency, maybe. And that depends on heat and what charge level the phone's internal battery is at too, because obviously as the lithium battery gets fuller, it becomes less efficient to charge. So I think that, like saying, you have this turbo power mod that adds 3,500 milliamp hours of capacity. It's not really true. You're adding far less than that because you're losing a lot of power to the transfer process. So again, if you had 700 milliamp hours of internal capacity, that may not be as much as what the 3,500 milliamp hour mod provides, obviously, but it comes at much less of a space cost, and the discrepancy isn't quite as big as the numbers would lead you to believe.
You make a very good point. By the way, I'm looking at your article. You guys should go read it. It's obviously on Android Police. That's where David writes. It's called Opinion. Motorola Z phones are quickly becoming little more than mod money grabs. And I'm not reading it because I'm talking to you, but that's the article that you were referring to. I just want to make sure you get credit where credit is due. You deserve it. You've already written a story and you just barely got back from New York. I mean, kudos to that. Maybe you wrote it when you were flying, though.
I did. I wrote it at the airport last night.
Nice. So look, we talk about the phone at length. There's another thing we all got given yesterday, which I'm a little more excited about. And it's the Moto 360 camera mod. Did you have one?
I do have one.
What do you think?
I foresee that I won't even test it. 360 cameras. I mean, don't get me wrong, the technology is very interesting. I think that there's some interesting content opportunities out there for certain applications, but I have yet to see anybody make the good case for mainstream consumers being interested in these tools. They're very good specialist tools. Don't get me wrong, especially for extreme sports, and just capturing, these interesting experiences. But I think consumers are going to be more interested in consumption of content than creating their own 360-degree videos. And so it's hard for me to understand, like, why this is something that should be sold, like in a carrier store, and why any normal person should be all that interested in it, especially when it's $300.
Yeah, so that's the biggest problem I've had with the mods. Personally, I think, obviously for me, it's been a free for all, right? I got all the mods and I didn't pay for them. Well, great. I get to play with cool mods, whatever. But the reality is people have to shell some pretty big, amount of money for these, right? And $300 for this device that seems like a completely dumb device. I think a lot of it is done in the software in the phone, right?
Yeah.
Seems a little high to me. I would say 200 might be better, although that's still high. And you're right. I mean, it's a gimmick at this point. Like, who I don't know, who would use this? I guess suppose you said there's a use case for families on vacation that want to have a gimmicky picture to put on Facebook. I mean, Facebook supports these 360 photos, right? And then and videos. And so of course there's action sports people. The reason I'm excited, frankly, is kind of selfish. It's because of all of the connections I have and reviews that I do, nobody's ever given me a 360 camera before. I never got the Samsung. I never got the LG. I've never gotten any of them. So, I see a lot of people posting photos from their 360 cams. And I'm like, I want one, but I don't want to spend money on it. I'm too lazy to reach out to PR to specifically get a device. So this just arrived in the mail. So I'm going to play with it. It's going to justify me taking the Moto Z out and about and doing some cool stuff with it. The Z2 Force, I mean. And I'm going to try it on the Z2 Play because supposedly it works on all of them. Eventually it will. At least right now it doesn't. I think it requires some firmware updates or something.
Motorola said there needs to be a firmware update before it'll work with anything else. Yeah. So, I mean, I've tried out the Gear 360, and I like I said, I can appreciate the technical aspect. Samsung especially, I think, put in a lot of work in making their stitching, very clean. And I love the industrial design of the original Gear 360. I felt it was so cool that the little kind of alien eyeball,
like
kind
the
of
little
thing going on,
built into.
Yes, it was so cool. It was as just something to like hold and play with a little bit. It was super cool. Like I'd love to just have one sitting on my desk, doing nothing. But as a 360-degree camera, well, it was just hard for me to find the use cases. Granted, I know that I'm probably nowhere near the average 360-degree camera, target market. I just think that action cameras have this kind of market pretty well cornered for now. The consumption audience for 360-degree content isn't quite there yet. I think that this is a case of the technology is readily available to manufacturers right now because really all you need is 2 wide-angle cameras and a decent stitching algorithm, and off you go. And so they're eager to put this out there, even if there's not necessarily a big market. Or even really a kind of good understanding of how people are going to use this stuff in a way where they're going to create compelling content of their own that they're going to want to keep capturing that way.
Yeah, I think I'm just basically I just want to dick around with it. That's
yeah, exactly. I think that's most people too. I mean, when I got the LG 360 cam, which is the first one I tried out, I wouldn't mess around with it. I took it to a Cars and Coffee. I actually bought a little like stupid little suction cup mount for my car, and I put it on the roof line to like take 360-degree video while driving. Which without OIS is not so great, but
and it won't be possible for this thing. Obviously, it's just attached to your phone. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it definitely has its novelties, and I think it's something to just kind of mess around and try with. Yeah, it's fun. Beyond that, I have a harder time. There's nothing ever brought me back to those cameras.
Yeah, no, I think to me it's a gimmick, and that's why it's kind of hard to justify the $300 price. Eventually, maybe it won't become be a gimmick anymore. But in terms of the Moto mod ecosystem, to me, like they're all a little pricey. Some of them very pricey, and other than the battery packs, which I think are pretty much a clear case, the speaker for some people, I've used my JBL, the old and the new ones I have, and it sounds good. And it's easy to set up because you just plop it in the back and it just works. But I would rather have a more universal Bluetooth speaker I can use with multiple devices. But then again, I do have multiple devices. A lot of people don't, right? So maybe there is a case for a mod that's a speaker that you occasionally use. But then, as Michael Fisher always says, you have to carry like this entire little universe of mods with you everywhere you go. So as for the Hasselblad camera, I can't even believe they put their name on that thing.
Oh God, it's garbage. It really is.
It's just a Chinese point and shoot, engine, right? Slapped in a mod, and it does the job. I mean, it's bigger sensor, it has optical zoom times 10, but the quality is not there. And frankly, I'd rather have a Galaxy S8 or Pixel XL or some phone that has a really good native camera to use than slap that thing on there, because you don't really get too many benefits. And the price is, again, ridiculous for what it is. So I think there's a potential for a mod like the Hasselblad to really be top notch. If Sony made one with their sensors, like an RX100 equivalent, then I'd be like, yeah, I'm into that.
Well, I mean, Sony tried, right? With the
they did, yeah. But I'm saying like the fact that it's a mod and it's magnetic and it kind of bounced the way it does is so much better than what Sony did with those remote controllable lens cameras. So that's to me, somebody needs to do this. Somebody needs to do a mod that shows that the Hasselblad mod idea was a good one, and actually execute and bring something to the table that makes you want to, for something, spend the money and take it with you.
Yeah, and I think most of that ends up coming down to just cost justification, and I'm sure the Hasselblad mod was justified on the basis of, hey, we've got this cheap Chinese zoom camera reference design, let's just stick it in this custom, body, and we're off to the races. Whereas, if we actually sit down and say, okay, let's design something from the ground up, pick our sensor, pick our lens system, decide, what the imaging performance should be like, figure out a deep way to integrate with the camera's ISP. Well, that starts costing a lot of money. And
yeah, I mean,
you're never going to make it back in sales.
At that point, you're better off buying an RX100 standalone camera and stick it in your other pocket, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just so hard to justify.
Yeah, it's the Bluetooth speaker versus JBL speaker. And I hate to have to be so negative about the mods because I like the idea. I think if anybody has successfully shown what a modular phone can be and do, it's Moto with the Z. But I think it speaks to the fact that modular phones are flawed to start with.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's just like you said, I can appreciate the technical accomplishment and kind of the kind of imagination it takes to do something like this, and the fact that Motorola did make a pretty big bet in terms of locking themselves into a phone design based on this concept. It just seems to have unfortunately panned out, and I think the way most people predicted it would, in that, well, there aren't going to be enough mods. The ones that are out are going to be too expensive or not that useful. And most people probably won't use mods at all because they aren't the sort of thing that you're going to use all the time. And so then it becomes difficult to justify the existence of the modular system in the first place.
And that's kind of how I feel. I mean, it's kind of a nerd's, wet dream in a way to have a modular phone. Technically it's kind of a very cool concept, but as we've seen from Ara going south and from, this being much simpler concept of modularity still having its issues. I think the whole concept of a modular phone, at least in our current market where we don't really make an effort to recycle and an effort to reuse, it's just not viable.
I think that's a very good point in terms of just the life cycle of phones. Like, why would I be so concerned about modular accessories if I'm just going to get a new phone every year and a half, 2 years anyway? It doesn't seem to matter very much. So phones haven't suddenly had their useful lifespans greatly extended. Mods are certainly not doing that at all to the Motorola phones. They're not adding to the effective lifetime of the phone, which really should be the goal of modularity, is to make your phone more useful longer. And once we can do that, then yeah, I agree. There's definitely more of a use case for modularity. But as is, we're not getting any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about the whole thing. I also want mods that are like, I'm not seeing the mods that are really unique. Like right now, I've emailed you about it and others. One of my clients is working on a hardware keyboard mod, like a slide out keyboard that's tilting and sliding. They're making good progress. It's coming along really well. It's of course going a lot slower than I expected, than even I expected when I already tripled the time it would take. So I'll be in touch about that with you when it's ready, and you in general, the tech journalists. But that to me is an interesting use case because there's a lot of people work in IT and other fields where they need to have a command shell on their phones, basically. And they want something portable and they don't want to pull out an iPad. And so I think that's a good use case of mods. But I kind of feel like we haven't really seen a lot of interesting mods yet. And cheap ones. I want to see $10 mods.
Oh yeah, if only, that'd be nice.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like you go to 7-Eleven and you're like, I want some LEDs on the back of my phone that blink at a strange rhythm when I play music and play on Google Play Music. And look, there's like this cheap Chinese thing you can stick in the back and has looks like a disco dance floor, right?
Yeah. I think there could be a lot of fun aesthetic stuff you could definitely do with just the power interface.
Yeah, and I mean, like fun stuff like that, if it was cheap and disposable, almost like you buy, a $10 iPhone case, right? That's like generic. That I think would have some potential. The customization of your phone just on the whim for aesthetic purposes is definitely a thing. Battery packs could be a lot cheaper, so I hope they come down in price. But again, it's not going to happen because there's not volume. We don't have enough of these Moto Zs and enough demand for the product, right? They promised us a wireless adapter, right? At some point, we have yet to see that, and that would be cool because again, the market size is 5 people, you, me, and 3 other tech journalists that like wireless charging. Assuming you do, I don't know.
I'm ambivalent. It's fine.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like it's not a thing that people make or break a phone for people, right? So as a mod, I don't think it will have that much traction. Now, to me, what doesn't make sense is that new power pack or turbo power pack or whatever, the one we got with Z2 Play. Mm-hmm. Why didn't they put the wireless loop in that thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
To me, that's how you want to do it. You want it to be a twofer, right? Like a battery pack and a wireless charging.
Yeah, exactly. I do like most of the changes they did make to it. It's really easy to hold on to. It's very grippy.
It's nice.
They added the charge indicator lights, which were just, that was the thing I was dying for on last year. It's like, how much battery is left in the mod? If I don't have it on, do I need to charge it before I go? And you'd have to slap it on and then look. And then, I was just
and then you're angry.
Yeah, it's just it's too much of an ordeal. And I mean, obviously it's great that it charges the phone faster too. I used it for like 2 full days with the Z2 Play. Granted, it did not make it the 2 full days, but I was definitely putting it through its paces. I think the changes there were good though, but obviously it costs more money now. So
yeah, I want to see, I don't know, I want to see more kind of clever things that are kind of out there and not normal. And that would be fun. But I don't think that's going to happen because there's no critical mass for it, and that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, on the plus side, Moto's trying. They had a hackathon, or more than one, I think. They had, they've had a contest where people compete in making, designing, or proposing mods, and so yeah. Look, I really hope they don't give up on this. At the same time, you need to be able to compete with the flagships that are already out there and well established. So that means you need a headphone jack. That means you need OIS on your camera. That means you need a bigger battery. That means you need a screen that doesn't scratch. And like if you'd made a Moto Z Force or Z2 that was like that, then we could have said, okay, this modularity is a value add. But you can't even compete with the rest of the big players right now with this phone.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, in that it's very hard to even if the mods didn't exist, to really understand what Motorola's kind of pitches here. I mean, compared to the S8 and S8 Plus, it's like, well, I don't see a reason why you.
And wait till you see the new iPhone. I mean, for the first time in ever, I'm excited to see what this 10th anniversary iPhone Pro, iPhone 8 is going to be, because finally we might see something from Apple that feels like it's competitive, because the last 3 years have been mediocre at best in terms of specs and features. Yes, it's a great experience. A lot of people love iOS for that, and I respect that, even though it's not my thing. But, I want to see a powerhouse of a technological tour de force from Apple, because they can pull it off. They have the resources. And so far, the only ones to come close have been Samsung with the Galaxy S8. Right?
I agree, definitely.
I mean, look at the tech in the Galaxy S8. And it's just like every freaking checkbox is there. It's just a freaking masterpiece of technology.
It is. Samsung's engineering is unrivaled, really. It's just, you just look at it and you're like, wow, it's impressive to me that this could be built.
And that is why I'm very, very gung-ho about what Apple will do. I have a feeling that they're going to blow us away, even though we don't care because we don't use iOS.
No, I mean, I'm hopeful they blow us away too. I mean, if it's that interesting, I might buy one just to compare the experience.
I will probably put the money down on one no matter what at this point, because I have good relationships with Apple PR, but usually I'm not enough of a player in the media space that they give me phones anymore. They used to when I was at Engadget, obviously. But I think I'm just gonna buy one. I think also it's the 10th anniversary. It's gonna be, it's gonna be one to have for the kind of for the archives, as it were. Every now and then I can buy a phone that I keep just because I feel it's kind of like a turning point, Galaxy S8 is the thing about the Galaxy S8 is it is like that. Is it in a way, in many ways, kind of like the best technology we can put in a phone today, and it really checks all the boxes. But I know that they're about to do that again with the Note 8. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. That, it's on the topic list, so I'm just segueing accidentally. But at the same time, maybe we should talk about that a little bit. Like the Note 8. Now we know it's going to be announced on August 23rd, right? Are you going to go to that?
Yes. I will not be at Unpacked.
Ooh.
Yeah, we don't typically go, so it's a bit of a trek for us. So we'll definitely be covering the Note 8 launch extensively.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm really excited about the Note 8. I'm not a big S Pen person. That's not what it's about. It's just that the Note is always traditionally kind of like one-upped the S series phone for that year with some feature that didn't make it. And so for me, it's a dual camera. I want to see what they do with dual camera. I can't wait to see what Samsung is going to do with a dual camera system.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to go with dual processing or if they're going to go with portrait and, wider angle. I'm curious as well to see what they do.
Or narrow angle, like telephoto, like the OnePlus and the iPhone.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So I'm curious about that for sure.
So that's August 23rd, folks, and I'm super stoked to see what will happen with that. And then what are your thoughts on the Nokia 8? That's announced to be shown on August 16th.
It doesn't matter for America, so I don't care.
You don't think we're going to get it?
We might. But given, how like half the launch it was for their other phone here, I don't expect.
Yeah, I've been in touch with their PR agency. They now have a US one, because until now I was talking to their European folks. And I said, do you have any Nokia 6 review units? And they're like, no. And I replied, I said, well, you mean no in general, or you're out of them? And they never replied to me. And I'm like, guys, do you even care?
No, I've heard a lot of outlets just ended up buying theirs. because it was easier.
What is up with that?
No, it's just not a good PR, agency, and honestly,
not only that, but I think they don't care. They don't care about the U.S. market. They're a Chinese company.
Yeah,
now,
like they can say
you know?
we launched in America. By the way, our phone doesn't even work with all the right bands or whatever.
Yeah,
but you can buy it.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting to me because like I started my journalism, tech journalism, as a hobby, reviewing Nokia phones in the mid 2000s, and that's how I became a pro. Eventually, left my video game development job and became a tech journalist full time at Engadget, which then led me on to doing stuff like Pebble and all this startup advising that I do as a consultant now. And I'm fond of Nokia, like regardless of the fact that it's obviously not the same Nokia and that they've changed hands, and there's hoping the whole Microsoft thing, and I'm kind of excited. Bring me another Android flagship that runs a very stock version of Android that is an alternative to the Pixels and the Motos and the OnePluses that are also running pretty pure versions of Android. I'm always happy to have another one to try out, especially in this case because imaging wise they have Zeiss on their side. So I hate, a lot of people don't know this, David, but the Lumia 950 and 950 XL, which are now 2.5 years old and are completely irrelevant in terms of market share and even as phones when they launched, in terms of imaging, are still some of probably the best camera phones today.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what comes of the Zeiss partnership in terms of what that means for imaging processing, and if optics really enter into it. See, I feel like those kind of partnerships take a little longer to develop, just like Huawei and Leica.
It took a while, but they're getting there, right?
Yeah, hopefully. So with Nokia, I just think the kind of lack of commitment to the US makes it hard for me right now to take them seriously. Excited. Maybe the Nokia 8 will see them put a stronger focus on the US, but at the same time, I feel like especially if you can't put yourself compatible with CDMA carriers in the United States, it's getting a little harder to take you seriously. I've had that same problem with the OnePlus 5, where it's like, well, it's clear that you guys are starting to struggle because of this. When Motorola can release a $99 budget phone that works on all 4 carriers.
Oh my God, the Moto E4! What an amazing piece of hardware!
It is, which is so funny. You talk down on Motorola for the Z2 Force, but it's like the E and the G, they're doing such a good job.
And the Z2 Play. I mean, seriously, I'm gung ho about the Z2 Play. I mean, what is your take on that phone?
To me, it's very whatever. I think it's overpriced for what it is. I think the chip's too old. I think it's a piece of hardware. It's nice. I think the cameras are okay. I think the cameras are probably a bit of a letdown, considering it's basically
because it's the Moto G5 Plus camera, essentially.
Exactly. So it's it's not a bad camera. It's just, well, if you're paying that much of a markup, I expect a little more, and that's kind of why
but it's half the price of the Z2 Force. So if you want the mods, isn't this the phone to go for?
I think so. But I think for a lot of people, they probably don't want the mods, which we talked about on the AP podcast. It's like, hey, why would you buy the Z2 Play if you don't care about the mods? The G5 Plus 64 gig is such a good deal, and you're getting basically the same performance.
Look, I agree with you, but let me make a case for the Z2 Play because I love it. And I'll tell you why. You get 90% of the flagship Z2 Force experience. In some cases, a better experience, bigger battery, slightly. You get a headphone jack with amazing audio performance, and you get the beautiful design, like metal, glass, like just top notch. You get a beautiful OLED panel, all of that stuff for half the price of the Moto Z2 Force. It's half the price. It's kind of like the OnePlus phones, right? You're going to say the OnePlus have flagship specs too, like in terms of processor, but you're right that 626 is but it's still a pretty solid platform. And if you want the mods, if you want a beautiful phone, you want something a little unique, the Z2 Play brings that down to that price point. Yeah, you're right. The G5 Plus from Moto is a better deal, right? But the display isn't quite as nice.
It's not. I agree.
But yeah, you're right. You're getting most. But honestly, to me, the E4 is where it's at. If you're gonna start getting on the cheap bandwagon and on the value bandwagon, this is not about value. This is about, to me, the Z2 Play and to some extent the G5 Plus are like, they're mid-rangers and they play at the opposite ends of mid-range, and they bring kind of flagship-ish beauty, or if you want to a mid-range level. The E2 doesn't have any of that pretense. The E2 is a plastic phone with a removable battery cover. It's just purely, what's it called? Like purely like just a practical phone. And $70 for what you get is unreal. It's as good as the G3 was just last year or 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's incredible what they've achieved with that little phone. I mean, it's, I think that's also part of Motorola's concern anymore, is like, we don't want to undercut ourselves too bad. I definitely think that's something they should probably consider. But I don't know. I just feel like if you don't care about the mods, the G5 Plus is such a good deal.
Is the one to go. Yeah,
and I understand, don't get me wrong, the industrial design on the Z2 Play and everything, it makes it feel more special. Sure,
yeah, exactly.
Without a doubt.
And if you don't have $800, honestly, there's even a case to be said that why would you even bother buying the Z2 Force when the Z2 Play exists? To me, the Z2 Play is the enemy of the Z2 Force.
Yeah,
because
I would say so.
Day-to-day life, most people don't care about the performance of the Snapdragon, but they care about things like the headphone jack.
Yeah.
They don't care about the dual camera, but they care about things like battery life. So the Z2 Play is a winner.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's what will make the Z2 Force win probably on raw sales, though. In fact, you can buy it from carriers. If you want to buy the Z2 Play from Moto, they don't sell the 32 gigabyte version. They only sell the 64, which is $500. So
that's a good point.
They
thought about this clearly.
Yeah, they did. I mean, and don't get me wrong, if you're on Verizon, the Z2 Play, you can get a crazy deal. Right. They're basically giving it away. I think they're selling it for the equivalent of like $240 over 20 per month or something.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, so not a bad proposition at all.
So let's talk about a few more phones that I have listed here in the show notes. That I want to hear from you about. We've talked about the Z2 Play, we've talked about the E4, we talked about the OnePlus 5, we talked about Galaxy S8, U11, briefly touched on it. What are your thoughts on the U11?
It's too damn slippery.
Yeah, well,
I love the camera. I think the camera is great. I think the battery life's good.
You're right. I
think that HTC's lack of a good supply chain around display panel is really starting to show.
Right.
The light leakage along the bottom of the panel drives me nuts. It just makes it feel cheap. The
fingerprint attraction makes it feel cheap too. I pretty much use it with the case.
You would have to use it.
I can't.
With the case.
I just can't.
It would drive me nuts too. I would say the other thing about it is the capacitive navigation keys feel very cheap phone.
I don't use them. I mean, well, I guess I have to, but I hate them.
Yeah, I really don't like that about it. And, they're just all those little things, and HTC's kind of aesthetic modifications on Android. Like, functionally, it's very light, but the way it looks is just, it's getting a little stale. It just makes me, what I'm starting to get from HTC is shades of Sony, where it's like, clearly money is not going into certain things. Attention is, we're in triage mode as far as smartphone development goes. And it's not that it's a bad phone or anything. It's just I can't think of a great reason why I would tell somebody to go buy it.
Other than the camera.
Yes, the camera's great. Definitely.
That's it. The camera is tops. But honestly, the other thing is, how can you persist with your no headphone jack? Like, are you insane?
Yeah.
In your market position, it's like you shot yourself in the foot. Now you're limping around with two limping feet because you shot yourself in the foot the year before with another phone in the other foot. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, look, I understand you wanted the U-Sonic thing to be a thing. So what? Include the U-Sonic headphones in the box, say USB-C, keep the headphone jack on the device. Those people who love the U-Sonics and swear by them, there's many, will enjoy that USB-C experience. Those of us who have 20-year-old headphones like the Beyerdynamic DT990s that I'm wearing while I'm speaking to you right now, and that sounded absolutely out of this world on the HTC 10, will not be let down by this stupid, crazy $13 dongle.
Yeah, HTC's decisions around that, I mean, I can understand some of it. I like that. What the one positive I will say about it is the fact that they're bundling a set of headphones that, they sell them for, I think, $30 if you want another pair, and they're worth it. They're good
for $30, they're definitely decent.
Exactly. And I just like that, Samsung did it this year too. Granted, they say their headphones are worth $100, which is no way that's true. But
yes,
I at the same time that raised the bar for sound quality on an included headphone and a smartphone, because that's all most people will ever use if there's a pair in the box. And so I like that. The kind of the audio snob in me is like, yes, people are going to realize that $10 $10 earbuds generally sound horrible. If you just up your investment a little bit, you can get a much better experience. So I will applaud HTC for that. But yeah, getting rid of the headphone jack in general is not friendly.
No. What about the KEYone? What are your thoughts on that one?
I never used it beyond the pre-production model. Never had an interest. I never used keyboard phones back in the day, and honestly, I'm a terrible person to ask about them because I will I will hate on them endlessly because I just don't see a point. It's a dinosaur. It's like asking me if like somebody came out with like a carbureted engine today. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It's irrelevant.
Yeah. No, I hear you, but at the same time, I admire what they've managed to do. Like, I'm not that audience like you. I tried even to get back into it, and I found that I was talking with about this with Jaime Rivera last week of Pocket Now on the podcast on the show. We talked about the KEYone, and he said, what would be great is if you could just tap the hardware keyboard just like you tap your screen instead of clicking. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, that would defeat the whole point, right? That would be like having a on-screen keyboard.
Yes.
But that we're so used to not having to click on things anymore. That's my first reflex when I pick up the KEYone is just to tap on that keyboard. Just tap, not click. And so I can't get used to it. I just can't. I mean, but I love the hardware. I love everything they're trying to do. I think of all the BlackBerries, it's definitely the best one. It's an Android phone with all the awesomeness that comes with that. If you like the hardware keyboard, go for it. If not, you're going to be frustrated. Don't go for it. That's basically the thing, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true.
But I think overall it's a good phone. I mean, if you forget the hardware keyboard and you look at the specs, it's got all the boxes for mid-range. A little pricey maybe, but it's really well made. So
yeah, for the audience that wants it, sure. I just don't understand that audience. So
well, they exist. It's strange.
Yeah.
And also, there's a cool kid factor. I mean, when I was at I/O, all the cool kids had a KEYone, including myself. Now, I'm not a cool kid, but, I pretend sometimes. And, I mean, everyone had one. And they were like, look, we all have our KEYones. And I'm like, yeah, you're trying to do the retro thing. I get it.
Yeah, and then like 2 weeks later, they like switched them out.
I know, actually, a lot of them are still using them. Like Joshua Vergara is still using his. I've talked to a lot of people who are using their BlackBerry KEYones for some reason. It kind of blows my mind, actually. As their primary phones.
Factor.
Like, I have a Pixel as my primary phone, and I'm already getting very annoyed with it because I can't wait for that Pixel 2. Oh my God, those renders.
Yeah.
Are you excited? You're like a Pixel guy. Like,
I'm a Pixel fanboy just to a fault. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are things about that phone that make me want to throw it sometimes, but
mine is in that state right now.
Yeah, it's very much still to me the best Android experience you can get, and the camera is just I still every once in a while take a picture of the camera and go, yep, that's why I love this phone.
Yeah, exactly.
And the battery life can be hit or miss, and the display is good, but the oleophobic coating rubs off so easily, and it gets so fingerprinty. The Bluetooth performance is terrible.
You know why that is? That's all HTC problems.
I'm sure it is.
All of those things.
Bad antenna design. Almost certainly. The back little glass window gets scratched up just horribly. The phone itself looks terrible. Like it is worn terribly. It's all this kind of stuff, like very much growing pains. But if I go to use something else for like a week, if I go to when I used the Z2 Play for like a week and a half, and I came back to the Pixel, I almost breathed a sigh of relief.
I know.
It was like, I agree. I'm back.
But look, I'm excited about what they're showing. Right, they're showing 2x1 display, which to me is the future. There's no doubt about it. Edgeless displays and 2:1 aspect ratios are the way to go. So I'm super stoked about that. It's going to be made by LG. I'm also super stoked about that, to be honest with you, because my favorite HTC phones, other than the Nexus 6P, were made by LG. The Nexus 5 is one of my all-time favorites.
So the Nexus 5 was, I think, kind of Google really got their industrial design right with that phone.
I know.
And it was iconic. It was instantly recognizable. It was definitely a good device.
So I'm looking forward to this guy. My issues, I have a question for you. Like, this is more selfish than anything else. Bear with us here, listeners. My Pixel takes forever to start up. And I don't mean start up to get to the lock to the screen. But if I turn it on and I let it, and I like unlock it and I let it sit there, it takes at least 2 to 5 minutes for it to have any notifications show up and anything to actually start happening on the phone when it's turned off.
Interesting. I mean, does can doze a little too much sometimes in my experience, where things just.
But this is from start, like from cold start, right? It's been off for the night or something. I turn it on in the morning. I go past, get to the point where they ask me for the pin. I type in the pin, and the phone just sits there doing absolutely nothing for 5 minutes before all of a sudden all the notification pop. I'm like, I want my notifications like right now. Like
I've not
when
heard
I turn
of this.
you on.
No,
it's a weird thing, and it's been doing it for a while now. It didn't always do it quite as much, but now it's really gotten bad. I'm also having a lot of lag on my Pixel. I don't know what's going on.
I'm not having much fun. So here's the thing, I'm very much in the kind of, once you've been in kind of the Android ecosystem deep for a while, you just start to learn that, well, once in a while it's time to factory reset your phone. And so that's the habit I've gotten into, is usually every 6 months I'll do a factory reset just to get rid of little problems. And it usually works, but people shouldn't have to do that. And it's
such a hassle because Google doesn't let you restore perfectly like Apple does.
Yeah, exactly.
How can we not have this, David?
Yeah. And
I'm the biggest Android fan, and I cannot fathom why it is that on the exact same model phone, I'm not even asking between phones, but on the exact same model phone, why is it that I can't do a backup to the Google Cloud that's encrypted, has all my passwords and everything in it, and all my app settings, and then restores a factory image of the phone without having to root it or anything?
The thing is, we're getting like ever so slowly closer. And so the technologies are the services are slowly starting to kind of coalesce around that experience. But Google has been very kind of lackadaisical in terms of how they approach this, because everything's optional for developers. Like if you don't want to opt into app backup, you don't have to. And so a lot of developers choose not to because they're worried it might cause a bug and create a support ticket when somebody gets a new phone.
Right.
And so a lot of developers think opt out. That said, with things like Smart Lock and then with Android O autofill, the autofill API should hopefully finally be the end of password woes on Android. I really hope once that's implemented, then when you get a new phone, you will just have all your passwords because they're all associated with your Google account now, and they'll just autofill.
That'd be awesome. It's kind of keychain on the Mac, yeah. One last thing before we go, because we're over time, but I want to hear your take on this really quickly. Like your 1 minute take on the G6. I love that phone. I think it's one of my favorite imaging experiences, and I still think it's one of my favorite phones, even though it's running an older processor today. I love the industrial design, how strongly made and bulletproof that thing is. Other than the software, which is, is an issue with LG, what is your take on the G6?
I like it. I think it's a good phone. I think LG has already shown, though, that, it was probably a little too expensive. And so they had trouble competing against Samsung in that sense. I love the way it feels in hand. I think that the 2:1 aspect ratio display is great. They got the size just right. The battery life seems a little hit or miss for me. On the cameras, I find it's divisive. I am not as much a fan because I don't find the images look natural enough. They look very processed to me. I know that Michael Fisher, for example, still loves the G6 and the G6 cameras, and this wide angle one especially, just like, he loves the post photos with that phone.
There's something about that the camera that just speaks to me. Yeah. I agree there's a lot of processing, but they look right, those photos.
They look very social media friendly. And I think, for a lot of people, they want that. And that's cool. I can definitely understand why LG makes them look that way. And I don't hold it against them. It's just not my favorite. I think that overall, though, it's a good phone. The older chipset, was kind of a letdown, but it doesn't seem to
especially with the G6 Plus. I would have really thought they'd put a 835 in there.
Yeah, I guess we're going to have to wait for the V30 for that.
I'm really looking forward to the V30 because, one of the things I did not like about their bigger phones in the past, the large bezels and too big because of the secondary screen, right? So hopefully with the 2x1 and the edgeless, it will get a little bit more compact. But more importantly, it was that removable battery, all that stuff just felt so clunky. I want something that looks like the G6 and feels like the G6. This amazing industrial design and is just bigger and better and just
I agree. That's what I'm absolutely hoping from the V30. I'm hoping what we're going to get. So hopefully that is what we get. And, maybe some more interesting stuff on cameras. I would be a little disappointed if they just reused the same G6 array. I think that there's some improvements.
It's the small pixels I have an issue with, and they've done amazingly well with them. Like their image processing is insane when you consider they're using 1.3 micron pixels. The photos in low light on the G6 for that size pixel are just stupendous. But
Yeah.
Imagine what it would be with larger pixels, boys and girls.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely room for improvement there. That, and I think the big thing we're going to see is hopefully LG's first OLED panel. So on a phone.
I know. Why is it that they are supposedly making OLED panels for Apple even?
Yeah.
And upcoming phone. Rumors. But how is it that we haven't seen an OLED phone from LG in the flagship realm since the G2 Flex, I think?
Yeah, and that was an interesting technology too. That was plastic OLED, which is
it didn't look that good. There's a lot of imperfections in the modeling, in the grays. And did you ever notice how blotchy the screen was?
Yes, and also if you flexed it, sometimes it became prone to just big circles dying in the display where they just could turn black.
I never had that.
Oh yes, I had 2 of them with that issue.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it was very very much a compromised technology, I think. So I think LG is obviously taking their time winding up this OLED business. So I'm hoping that it's taken so long because they've been trying very hard to work out all the kinks and get to that hopefully a Samsung level of panel.
Oh my god, the Samsung displays. Oh.
Yeah.
Just thinking about one gives me a drooling feeling in my mouth.
Oh, it's true. It amazes me that every year that they manage to make those incremental improvements. It still blows me away. It's how much better can it really get, guys? And then they keep making it better.
It's hold my beer. Yeah. Right?
It's you thought it couldn't get brighter. It can.
Yeah, watch this. Listen, David, thanks for being on. We need to wrap it up. I'd love to give you a chance to pitch yourself. Tell people where they can find you, what you do, all that stuff, your handles, etc.
Sure thing. You can find me at androidpolice.com, where I'm managing editor. You can find me on Twitter saying probably inappropriate things. My handle is RDR0B11, which is totally not even, nobody understands what that is. Just look me as David Ruddock on Twitter. And thanks for having me, Miriam. Had a good time.
Thanks so much for coming on, dude. I've wanted to have you for a really long time. You're one of my favorite tech journalists because I think you and I kind of click on how opinionated we both are and how we don't, hide it, right? And but I think we're just being genuine, which is I think what I wish more people were in our business. And so it's a pleasure to have you on. You guys know where to find me. The podcast is at mobiletechpodcast.com. Tell your friends, please subscribe. I'm Tank Girl at TNKGRL. That's the comic book without the vowels. And of course, my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Miriam Joire, just my legal name spelled out, Miriam with a Y. And I want to thank the folks at World Podcasts that cut this podcast for me and host it. Because they're awesome and I couldn't do this weekly show without them. Stay tuned for next week. Obviously, I'll have a guest on where we're going to discuss the Z2 Force in more detail because at that point, we'll have had some serious time with the device. And there's always more to come, so tune in next week. Thanks again, David.
Thank you.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.